What's your
Yeah.
thinking on like a universal basic income or a guaranteed income to kind of mitigate some of these effects of people having to rely like really hardcore on their employer, gig-based employer for things like healthcare or a basic,
Yeah.
enough money to keep them afloat while they might be, because on the surface level, it sounds like a pretty cool thing. Like Uber, you can set your own hours. You don't have to,
Yeah.
wake up at 8 o'clock. You can take your lunch break whenever. And I've had
Yeah.
conversations with Uber drivers where they talk about, how they enjoy those aspects of the job. So I feel like, there's potential for these companies and their business models to maybe be a little bit more successful in, with a more robust welfare state. But obviously, we also don't want to just offload all of the, corporate responsibility onto the taxpayer. So just what's your thinking on that?
It's a great question, and it's one that I've struggled with a lot over the years. And my two kinds of, the things that come to mind when I talk about the universal basic income are one, that the conversation often does exactly what you're saying. It offsets the discussion about corporate responsibility. So you don't have to talk about companies paying their taxes. You don't have to talk about companies paying a minimum wage or overtime compensation. It totally displaces that discussion, and that's when this conversation is brought up in a regulatory capacity. When it's brought up in California, it's often brought up by tech companies, because this helps their business model when my taxes increase so that there's a universal basic income, but corporate taxes don't increase, and of course, like that's where we need to be taxing. We need to be taxing these companies in robust ways, and helping close the loopholes that allow them to not pay the kinds of taxes they need to be paying. So that's one thing, is that I'm so worried that a UBI will make it so that companies like Uber and Lyft can say, well, look, we don't have to pay workers anything that their labor is worth, because look, they have this income. I also worry about what it might do to the potential for worker organizing. We're at a point where there's like such extraordinary inequality in the U.S. and all over the world, and workers are going to play a big role in the coming years and fighting back against that. And I worry about what a UBI might do to that potential for social change. I also think that it might incentivize and make invisible the work of the poor in the global South, in so much as if it is a true basic income, then a lot of the most low wage work can be done by people elsewhere, and then that really creates we already live in a really disparate world, but it sort of exaggerates that the sort of global inequalities and the way that work is performed in the industrial economy. So, like on the face of things, I think it is interesting, and I want to continue to think about it, and I do continue to have these kinds of discussions with colleagues, but I have some real hesitations about, in reality, what might happen if there is a UBI in the U.S. And then I don't feel the same thing. Like, I feel like there are ways to establish a social wage that maybe gets around some of these issues. I don't know, but I do know that regardless of whether or not there is a UBI or some kind of social wage, that the aspects of gig work that you're describing that people like, I mean, who wants a boss? I don't want a boss. That's why I'm an academic. No one wants a boss. Like, the existing employment system that we have in the US, the traditional employment system, is oppressive. It is based in a master-servant relationship, and no one wants to be a servant. And so one way in which they have avoided this in the gig economy, or at least made people feel more free initially. Veteran drivers will tell you something very different about their freedom and flexibility, but something that people really like, the alleged control over their time, which I can dispute a little bit. That is something that economists have found just in the last few weeks with studies, that not only is it not tied to employment explicitly. There's nothing about the law that says that you can't have a flexible schedule, but it also doesn't as a business model doesn't preclude employment. So Michael Reich at UC Berkeley came out with a study that showed that Uber and Lyft in California could pay their workers a minimum wage, offer workers' compensation, continue to provide a quote unquote flexible schedule. And I say it's not really flexible because they tell you at the beginning of the week when you need to work in order to make money. They like send you this email that says, oh, if you work in these, this is when you're going to make money. And if you don't work in those times and you work at like 2 a.m., you end up losing money driving around. But that it is possible, there's really this dichotomy between flexibility and secure wages is an invention of capital. You can have flexibility and secure wages. And one of the things that I was really fighting for before Prop 22 was to grow the panoply of protections for workers in the United States and create legislation that gave workers a right to their own schedule. I mean, a right to time. That's what we all want, is a right to control over our own lives. If we live transnational lives, we have families to take care of. We want to be able to leave work and take care of our sick kid if we get a call from the school and not worry about getting fired in the process. And things like that are possible without getting rid of flexibility.